I agree completely with John Pilger about the Ukraine situation, and I think it's very, very worrying. We're being drawn into a war situation by this brainwashing by the press. It's partly, I think, because the Guardian's on the wrong side in this matter. I think something as drastic as possible has to be done to put some common sense into this situation, and I'm interested if John's got any ideas, but I can't help thinking that some sort of conference or some sort of indication in the press signed by a lot of responsible people, something of this sort has to be done now before the situation gets completely out of hand.
You want to answer that, John?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, please.
Well, all pressure is useful. A lot of people signing an advertisement in the newspaper is a good idea, depending who they are, of course. But that's called direct action. But there isn't any. So talking about it's fine, but you know, room full of privileged people with access to pretty well everything you can think of, technologically and materially, and there's no direct action. So good idea. Yeah.
So Ross, you mentioned that PGP traffic stands out like sore thumb, I suppose. Does the same apply to Tor traffic? And should we be worried about using Tor in Western societies?
There has been an arms race over the past 2 or 3 years between the Tor developers and the government of China. The government of China keeps on writing more and more filters to try and pick out Tor traffic, and the Tor developers keep on munging it around in order to make it look like ordinary SSL TLS traffic. Ultimately, the government of China may win this one, but it may not matter that much because Chinese people can then use VPNs or ordinary proxies to make the hop out of China itself.
And in Western countries?
Western countries don't seem to bother. There have, according to the Snowden papers, been efforts made at GCHQ and elsewhere to find generic hacks against Tor. The biggest long-term threat, perhaps, is if you've got fine-grained correlation between the traffic coming out of your PC and the trafficking into other people's websites, then that can be used as what's called a traffic confirmation attack. But as far as we can see, the spooks don't maintain enough fine-grained traffic information on enough places to exploit that at scale. We'll just have to watch this space.
Yeah, I mean, I could add a small sentence.
No, well, go on, Andy, go
Okay, because the precondition for doing that correlation attacks. Oh,
sorry, your microphone.
just a small add-on comment, because the preconditions for doing that correlation attacks you just described is, of course, much better in the Western environments as we are on the full take. So we have to see that as the potential reason why they don't bother that Tor use here in our hemisphere.
Sorry. Hi. You put up a query which said, show me the medical records of a 48-year-old woman with a 9-year-old, both of whom have psoriasis. And that gave a picture of the sort of information that can be gathered. But I put two people here, and they kind of ran away scared from emulating the sort of bad things that could be done with that data. So is it something that's illegal, or would we get somebody into trouble if they were to fake up queries against the NSA or GCHQ data, i.e. I'm looking for the CEO who are ill so I can play with the share prices of a company, or any sort of criminal activity you could possibly think of that could be done with that data, and then actually say, actually, this could be done, and this could be done, and this could be done, and this could be done, to get other people interested?
Well, I've thought of numerous scenarios where NHS data could be used to attack GCHQ. If you're looking for people to recruit, for example, you might start by looking, for example, for people who have got dread diagnosis or who are accessing gay porn without telling their wives or whatever. I mean, there's masses and masses of stuff there. If you're an enemy signals intelligence agency. And even if you've only got access to the medical stuff, you know, you can look at diagnoses that people are likely to be embarrassed about.
I'd like to.
Would that get me into trouble?
Maybe you.
Well, in the UK, we've got a defective implementation of the Data Protection Directive, in that recital 26, was it, 27, wasn't implemented. And that means that the data protection authorities here, the Information Commissioner, pretend that anonymization works even when it doesn't. And so after the mass release of hospital episode statistics data to Google and others back in March, we made a complaint with the Information Commissioner, and he turned it down on the grounds that these data were not personal data. Now, I can think of all sorts of radical follow-on actions that you might try. For example, some universities have got de-identified copies of all the automatic number plate recognition data, okay, where your license plate number has been replaced by an encrypted value. Now, if you can figure out that a certain celebrity went to the following events, you can then pick out their license plate from amidst this massive data, and you can pull out all the other sightings of that particular celebrity. Now, if you were to do that with the celebrity's consent, it would not be illegal, and you could presumably get these data by means of a Freedom of Information request, because the Department of Transport has said that this data is not personal. So you see, there are many beautiful things for investigative journalists to explore around this whole story around what sort of data are identifying. But to go into that in detail would be a conversation offline.
Let me just allow me to just add one more thing why about emphasizing the biological data use. It is true that governments know very well the value of that data. The US president, whoever it is, since over 20 years now, if he travels abroad to another country, his team brings a chemical toilet. He doesn't shit in a normal bathroom out there on this planet, because you could read from his biological output his medication, his life expectations, his sicknesses, and his genetic preconditions and so on. So and that's what's called operational security. So welcome to the world of paranoia. Maybe too direct, but.
Hello, my name's Yuri. My question is to John Pilger. Noam Chomsky talked about how there's an adversarial culture in the U.S. So despite all the flaws of the mainstream press, the corporate press in the U.S., there's people like Howard Zinn, and they're celebrated. Certain dissident voices are celebrated. And if you go on the web, there's FAIR.org, Center for Public Integrity and Democracy Now! But how come in the UK there doesn't seem to be a lot of independent adversarial journalism? I mean, the only people I can think of is Media Lens or someone such as yourself and Nick Davies that has criticized the corporate press, but there doesn't seem to be a sort of British equivalent to Democracy Now! Apart from Mark Curtis, of course.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure exactly what Chomsky was referring to, but the people that you quote represent a very tiny group. And for most people in the United States, their principal source of information, apart from the internet, and is television. And that's true in this country as well. So very few people turn on to Democracy Now!, however admirable it is. Proportionately, I suppose, it's a very significant audience. But really, as far as most people are concerned, their information is repetitive. It comes from the, I think, 6 major corporations that control the major mainstream media in that country. In this country, the press basically is 3 major corporations, the major press. You have a situation in Australia where 70% of the capital city press is controlled by Rupert Murdoch. Throughout, as I tried to explain earlier, that ism that Rupert Murdoch represents is reflected right across the so-called and misnamed mainstream media. That's where most people go for their information. There are many, many people who, of course, go through the internet and know how to navigate the internet. But a surprising number of people don't navigate the internet. So that's an admirable group, and they do very good work, and they inform a significant number of people, but it's a small proportion.
Can we have one more last question here?
This is really to the whole panel, but specifically to John as well. Does anyone know of any examples, successful examples, whereby a country has refused to become part of this huge surveillance estate? I'm thinking maybe Iceland, but I know, John, that Prime Minister of Australia, Gough Whitlam, just mentioned that he might not renew the lease for Pine Gap, and his government was overthrown by the CIA with collusion of the British state.
Yeah. Well,
Shall I just check whether there are more questions? Because then we should maybe round up. Is there any more questions?
sorry.
Yeah, one more there. 2 more, yeah? Just get the questions and then one answer.
Not too many, just 2. Yeah. Otherwise we forget them.
Yeah, my questions are also for John Pilger and for Olia, relating about what Olia talked about, the necessity for users generating their own content and like creating the internet in a way, and the threat you were talking about with the media. What is the potential like for the younger generation to challenge this established structure of media, and what role does could education play in that?
Okay. Well, my opinion is education is critical, and that's where part of the problem, or the major part of the problem, lies. The growth of media education has been one of the problems. People internalize and lose, I think, what is often for many people a natural instinct of inquiry, of wanting to find out, of even wanting to improve things. But, you know, there are many outlets for young people to challenge. They can challenge, long as they know that it's okay, they can challenge education, they can challenge the media, they can challenge any status quo. I'm a little bit of a loss to say that's what they should do, but that's what they should do.
Should I add something about it? Thank you for coming back to this. I mentioned making web pages as like an ultimate form of activity online, not only because it's quite an active position and quite a free space what you have, but also because this is a way to escape the systems that are collecting data about you, because it's not a structured data. Yeah, it's very you are not interesting for services, for example, if you have a web page. Yeah, and you are not following the semantic structure that Facebook or Twitter or whoever is given to you. So that's an important thing. Can I ask something using there? Can I ask you something in connection to it? Do you have a comment to the recent announcement of WhatsApp about the end-to-end encryption?
It's the reaction of the tech industry to Snowden has been helpful. Engineers at Google absolutely hit the roof when they saw the GCHQ slide about hoovering up this stuff between data centers. And there's a determination to see to it that the spooks only get stuff through the front door. Now, the WhatsApp decision is part of this, as is the Apple move to encrypt the iPhone, as is Facebook turning on encryption, as is Facebook making access available through Tor. And the kickback against this, you can see when our Richard Hannigan, the new director of GCHQ, is jumping up and down accusing Facebook of aiding terrorism and basically trying to bully Facebook into breaking the US Electronic Communications Privacy Act by failing to hand over stuff that they used to hand over. And this is going to be very, very interesting indeed, because if I were Mark Zuckerberg, the only rational response for me to that would be to say, right, in future, every request from GCHQ will go through our lawyers, and that means it will take 6 months. So we're in for some very, very interesting times. And in the 1990s, we made some progress on this because the tech industry and NGOs and freedom groups had aligned interests against the Clinton administration's attempt to steal all our cryptographic keys. We may be moving back into that sweet spot where we can get much of the tech industry on side in a pushback against the NSA. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For the next session, I would like to ask you to all leave this hall and take all your stuff. We have really half an hour break, so you can breathe, fresh air, go to the crypto bar, check out Newspeaks Live, look at the exposition. And in half an hour, we start with a theater play. Wow Pengo 1989. In this space, yeah. But that's why everyone has to leave.